A businessman from Shanxi stands before a nearly completed high-end maternity center in Sichuan, his smile reflecting a hard-won sense of security. The local government had courted him with land grants and promises, rolling out a red carpet that made him feel like a vital protagonist in a local success story. However, this confidence shatters when leadership shifts and a new party secretary, Pu Faiyu, assumes power. The red carpet is abruptly withdrawn, replaced by a stop work order that renders the gleaming structure illegal overnight. Within the halls of power, whispers circulate of a plan to harvest the project, to seize the assets, convert the center into a state-run kindergarten, and pocket the resulting massive subsidies. This maneuver is a classic manifestation of a predatory tactic known in Chinese business circles as closing the door to beat the dog. When veteran investigative journalist Liu Hu learned of this dispute, he recognized a recurring pattern of systemic violence. He recalled the 2021 tragedy of Tua Jiguang, a prominent professor who climbed to the roof of a university building and jumped to his death. Before his final act of protest, the professor had spent months fruitlessly seeking justice against Pu Faiyu, alleging the official had used his authority to violently demolish his home while ignoring the law. Liu Hu connected these dots in a published challenge to the local administration, noting that the secretary who drove a professor to suicide was now driving businesses into bankruptcy. Within days, the article was scrubbed from the internet, and Liu Hu himself was detained on charges of illegal business and slander. This instantaneous shift from a commercial conflict to a criminal crackdown poses a chilling question regarding who the real criminal is in a system where a local official can make both a $1 million investment and a human life disappear. This narrative serves as a diagnostic for the health of the world's second-largest economy. To understand China's current state, one must look past the stock market tickers in Shanghai to the maternity centers in Sichuan. While often framed as a human rights issue, the underlying mechanics reveal a fundamental tension between local power abuses and the central government's existential need for state capacity and economic stability. State capacity, in this context, refers to the government's ability to implement its goals effectively. Friction arises between the local official, driven by the pressure to fill depleted coffers through asset harvesting, and the central planner in Beijing, who recognizes that such localized theft threatens to collapse the national economy. The economic cost of this corruption is not merely a moral abstraction, but a measurable drag on national productivity. In a small industrial hub in Sichuan, an entrepreneur named Mr. Zhang experienced this friction when a newly appointed county official shredded his infrastructure contracts overnight under the guise of reevaluation. Mr. Zhang's loss was more than capital. It was a loss of faith in the predictability of the rules. From a systemic perspective, centralized anti-corruption efforts are an attempt to ensure that a local bureaucrat's whim does not sabotage the nation's industrial integrity. For China to maintain its economic output, the center must aggressively prune these localized inefficiencies to keep the gears of the state moving without friction. The economic impact of these localized fires is significant. Research by Feng and Hu on capacity utilization in state-owned enterprises illustrates how corruption literally halts production. In an efficient economy, factory machines should run at high capacity, yet corruption introduces agency costs that act as sand in the gears. A corrupt manager might prioritize kickbacks over efficiency, creating artificial bottlenecks or purchasing overpriced materials from relatives, leaving machines idle. Data from a quasi-natural experiment involving Central Committee inspection visits shows that after an anti-corruption campaign hits a region, the local SOE's capacity utilization jumps by approximately 10.4 percentage points. This increase represents latent potential that was previously suffocated by graft, achieved without new workers or technology. Furthermore, the reduction of these agency costs improves investment efficiency by redirecting funds from vanity projects into actual production. This positive impact flows down the supply chain. When major enterprises stop demanding kickbacks, suppliers are no longer forced to pad prices or cut corners. Consequently, the entire industrial chain becomes faster and more honest. The central government views the Sichuan trap not just as a grievance, but as a 10% drag on national GDP.
In this light, the crackdown is a matter of economic survival, as the state recognizes that global superpower status is incompatible with local officials consuming a tenth of the industrial output. However, the pursuit of this efficiency creates its own shadow. Investors, both foreign and domestic, face the nightmare of a missing legal shield. The fate of Professor Tuo Jiguang sends a deafening message that neither education nor status provides protection if a local party secretary decides to ignore the law. To address this confidence crisis, Beijing has introduced the Private Economy Promotion Law, the first fundamental law dedicated to the private sector. This legislation attempts to redefine the private sector as a vital pillar of the economy, a significant ideological shift in a Marxist-Leninist system designed to signal that private entrepreneurs are no longer temporary tools, but permanent residents of the state. A key mechanism in this law is the negative list, which reverses the traditional permission-based mindset. Instead of requiring government approval for every action, entrepreneurs are theoretically free to do anything not explicitly forbidden. The law also targets policy consistency to prevent new leaders from invalidating previous promises, a direct legislative response to the Sichuan trap. This is a high-stakes endeavor, as private firms contribute 60% of GDP, 80% of urban employment, and 92% of all registered businesses. Yet, a paradox remains. The state promises a legal shield while simultaneously arresting journalists like Liu Hu for exposing the very corruption the law aims to prevent. This highlights the gap between the text of the law and a reality where local police and courts remain beholden to local party secretaries rather than abstract legal principles. Because the central government seeks the predictability of the rule of law without the political mechanisms of independent courts or a free press, it must rely on party discipline as a parallel system of oversight. This shift moves the focus from law to human engineering. Research by Justin G. Hall suggests a positive selection theory resulting from these crackdowns. By increasing the risk of imprisonment and eliminating gray income, the system strains out rent seekers who are only in it for the money. The remaining applicant pool for civil service positions shows a measurable jump in integrity and public service motivation, specifically a 0.554 standard deviation increase without a loss in competence. This anti-corruption policy is even re-engineering the parenting styles of the nation. As the old way of getting ahead through connections becomes too risky, households in inspected areas have increased their investment in their children's genuine education and moral conduct. This creates an infrastructure of control that mirrors Michel Foucault's concept of the panopticon. The central inspection teams act as a guard tower. Officials, never knowing when they are being watched, begin to police themselves. Discipline is internalized, aiming to cure the illness to save the patient through thought reform and self-criticism. The system is bypassing the law to achieve legal-like outcomes. The man standing in front of his half-built maternity center in Sichuan remains caught in the gears of a violent overhaul. It is a race between this top-down infrastructure of control and the deep-rooted habits of local power. Ultimately, the state's capacity is being measured not by the bridges it builds, but by its ability to engineer a bureaucrat who does not steal. The fundamental question remains whether a perfectly efficient, corruption-free machine can be created without entirely removing the human element and the dissent that allows for true accountability.